Thanks to both of you for being part of this weekend. It felt like...
You're welcome.
Oh.
I like that you're the host.
I'm glad you like it.
Thanks for having us on this morning.
The weather in Baltimore.
Our drive time.
So I wanted to first ask you to respond to each other's talks. Both of you gave keynotes during Missional Voices this year, and wanted to give you a chance to just respond to what each other shared during this weekend.
You want to go first?
You want to go first?
Whatever.
I can go first. Everybody's just coming in now. I feel like we should pause. You go. Anyway.
All right.
First of all, I want to say everybody has redeemed themselves. We sold a ton of stuff.
Yes, good.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was huge. It made a big difference. And thank you to everybody who was taking selfies on our Syrian welcome mat. It's so grateful. It's so nice to put something out there. And I think it really is an example of how missional programs work, is we say what we need, and we say it as honestly as we can, and people join in with us. It's really great, so thank you for that. But I really did have an honest question.
Oh.
Is that all right?
I don't know. You didn't cover this last night when we agreed on what we were going to say. I'm just kidding.
We were drinking, in my defense. No, so what I was thinking about is it has to do with your talk, but it also has to do with your book that's coming out soon that I was privileged to get to read an early draft of, which is a great, beautiful book. And it's talking about this whole movement, what happened? How did we go from ecclesia to church? And how did we go from fishermen's clothes to vestments? And how did we go from, to come to temple worship, and what was lost and how much we have at stake in it? And so my honest question, based on what you were talking about yesterday in your book that everybody should read, is what does your kingdom look like? When people are going out of church and we're unvesting and we are ecclesia again, not church, are there no more bishops?
Yeah.
That's
I think it's right? Yeah, I think that the church, okay, so I'll answer your question, but I think that there's actually a practical piece of that too. When I did not, and I told you this last time, I did not imagine becoming a bishop. So that was not in my game plan to begin with. So my kingdom, and Jason and I talk and dream a little bit about this, is when Joanne and I experience kingdom, it is at our dinner table with a diverse group of people sitting around sharing a meal and a bottle of wine. That the kingdom somehow is this mix of people from every kind of part of life together at the table. What happens before and the journeys that come to that table and the journeys that happen after that table are part of that kingdom, but there's something at the table that happens that is part of our story of the kingdom telling. And you don't need bishops for that. And you don't need money for that. And you don't need structure for that. But I think that actually is the real press. And then I do think that it challenges us to ask the big questions about how do we use and are we stewards of what we have, if that's the work in the kingdom. We haven't always had bishops in that sense, but we have always had apostles. And we have always, it seems at least in our tradition, had individuals who went and blessed those tables and those people by laying hands on them and blessing their story and reminding them they're part of something bigger. The episcopate today is a little different than that. But that's so I don't know. That'd be my gut response, I think.
I love the idea that somewhere, that I think what you said was, accept our lostness so we can be found. Mm-hmm. And that the church, and that's what you said yesterday too, that the church itself is the one needing the being found. You know, mm-hmm. that we are the guy in the ditch as a church, right. Looking for something.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, I do think we're lost. Unless we figure out how to live as the lost, the least, then it's not going to work. And if we're always rescuing, or we're always the people in the power, if we're always that's a problem. And so and yet we have power, yet we have authority, yet we know a story, so it plays off of those two things. But the story of the gospel in the scriptures anyway, just opens up to me as this amazing, diverse community of people doing all kinds of things in response to this person of Jesus. And it takes all kinds of people, and they're all doing different things. There's no unified vision of what it is, church is, institution. So it's this. So the question is, kind of as episcopos, as bishop who sees this kind of episcope of all these things, how do we, as an organization, do that and live into that in some way? And I would say that it's for me, because I didn't imagine that I would be doing it. What I heard in your talk yesterday, I think, is a real gift to people. Was your story on the airplane. I think that people in this room, people listening to us, people who I meet and me get sick and tired of battling against the machine, the institution, the people, the naysayers, how long, and that we're, you do this work. And so I think just naming the fact that it's exhausting. And it doesn't matter what part of it you're in. I wonder if what it means to kind of step back and give one another a bit of that grace ourselves in some way. Yesterday I felt like you gave that to me personally, but you gave that to us because of your kind of transparency about where life comes and also where the exhaustion comes, and that those are all kind of entwined. Kindness, I was thinking about this today. The culture offers a understanding of kindness without a meta-narrative of love, forgiveness, and humility. And we have a story that says kindness is not just kindness, but it's cruciform in nature, right? And so you get exhaustion from that. It was good. Thank you.
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk this weekend about suffering. And as I'm listening to you speak, I'm wondering, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily all about alleviating it, but being present with it and acknowledging that that's life, that is part of it. That's hard to hear, but is that part of the work? Is not necessarily always trying to fix it, but to be present with it?
Me?
Either of you. This is your conversation. I'm just what they call me, the bumpers.
Well, what I want to talk about, I do think it's obviously being present. No, I'm just saying being present with suffering is a big deal. As a priest, everybody's, we're all doing that kind of stuff. But what I was interested when I was sitting here listening to the great speakers and all the stuff is that we still sound so Episcopalian. Seriously, and I think that language is a problem. If we talk about discerning the call, being present with suffering. If we were at a Baptist place, it would be, the Lord laid it on my heart. There'd be another language that we wouldn't be familiar with. If we were in a business situation, it'd be like, I felt like it, or I had a vision for it. There's language in all the different places we are. And I think it's a barrier sometimes for the work that we want to do, that if you sound Episcopalian, it's not just that you have a collar on, it's that you have that language, and that is a barrier for people, that they can't hear it. They can't hear you. And I think that's true for me too, and it's like, the way I think about it is we can't think outside the box if we're not living outside the box ever, ever, ever. So we are going to sound Episcopalian, and you have the advantage if you've been in a lot of different denominations over the years. But for some of us, I was born Episcopalian. I went to the University of the South. It was like, I had Episcopalian like tattooed on my heart. And, and I would just walk in and just, I know the prayer book from cover to cover. I know it. I don't have to use the Eucharistic prayers. But that's not helpful to me in this wider world, in some ways. It is about serving and loving, but it's not that helpful if I'm walking out on the street and engaging somebody to want to have a conversation about, coming into Magdalene and working at Thistle Farms, whatever the conversation is. If I'm like, so I'm discerning for you. I think you need to be in a process of discernment. They'd be like, the hell are you talking about? I mean, that's big though, right?
But couldn't it be a little bit like, jazz? It's not like anybody can just go play jazz. You need to have some foundational training. You need to know some things. I mean, I'm sure some people in the room are wondering this. Like, could it not be that those tools you have prepared you to kind of just riff out in the neighborhood?
Yeah, but I also think it also blocks you from being real. Mm. I mean, like, just to say, hey, like, we don't have to have, all the steps of ministry and all of that. That can be, they are tools, and it is learning an instrument so you can riff, but it's also, to me, it prevents us from, like, saying, it doesn't have to sound good. It doesn't have to fit in a theological box. I don't even have to, I don't have to have a meta-theology around it or whatever. I just want to just love somebody and just be in that. I don't know if does that sound weird, dumb? What is it? It sounds like I'm not smart, but it sounds like.
No. I mean, I think you're brilliant. So I was just gonna name that.
Is this being recorded? Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, you got it. No, I think this is one of my favorite passages. Jesus did not go to the well with a theology of living water to try it out on somebody.
Yes. Yes.
Waiting for somebody to come along, Oh, yes, I'm thirsty. It's like, that's not what happened at all. But very quickly, and I think Raymond Brown and some of his work about the church the apostles left behind helps us to understand that very quickly we begin to desire to protect what was so very special for us, that we wrap it in a language, a culture, our own context from which we receive it. And Malcolm Guy always likes to remind me that the swaddling clothes are not the baby. I think a reformer said that at some point. But it's just, you see what I'm saying, that that there's a piece of this which is truly moving out, and yet there's a part of the organization that has a natural desire and tendency to control for the very best reasons, to create loss of systems. We need it as an armor for ourselves to kind of gird ourselves up to do something that we consider dangerous. And I just think those are all pieces of things that came later. I just don't see it as, I keep looking, but I just don't see the formation for missional life class that Jesus taught his disciples. I don't see it. And so there was context and life being lived out, and they were watching and engaging, and they have questions, and he challenges them. So it's a whole other thing that happens. But basically, he sends them out. And they sometimes, and they do some good stuff, and then they do some stupid stuff.
Right.
Right. I mean, the things you kind of go, yeah, that was, but which we do too. It's just to say that I think there's a big piece of this as we're opening ourselves up to imagine. We need to not stop at the Reformation or the 3rd century. We might need, and really to open ourselves up to kind of go back and look at the text to see what it is that's happening kind of apostolic church in that. What are the stories that they thought were important enough to pass down to us? And none of them seem to have a class in them about the vocabulary of the church or a catechism.
I agree. And I think it's like there's a thing that sometimes, I don't know, it's the 8th deadly sin is to to offend somebody. In the Episcopal Church, it's like I'm offended. And then that's supposed to stop you. Like I can't do anything to offend you, or you can't do anything as a pastor to offend anybody. It's like, guess what? We rail against principalities. That's what we do. If you're not railing against Trump or whoever is in power, we are not doing the whole job. If we are not hanging out, when we're thirsty at a well and doing the work without formation or knowing what's coming next, we aren't. And I'm remembering a story of Rosanna, who was one of the most, she's a hysterical, wonderful woman. She was trafficked when she was young from Honduras to the U.S. and then got stuck here. And, she spoke very little English, and she came to us and she said, "You bitches gonna take care of me?" And it was like, yes, we bitches are gonna take care of you. I mean, that was the language.
Right.
And that was a good language. I mean, it was like, let's go, okay. For just for today, I will be that for you. Tomorrow, I will not. But today I will. And I think for all of us to say, today I will be that for you. And I don't generally get called that. I don't generally, appreciate that. But some days you need to, and you need to say it's not about being offended or language or whatever. It's like sometimes I'm mad about some injustices, and I might rail to the wrong people, but and that's just how it is. If you're doing the work, that's how it is. And I think I just don't want everybody to get. I just think Episcopalians need to get a little tougher skin. Stop being so offended. For me, that's what I say to me too.
No, we are offended. We're offended.
Yeah, I'm a bit offended by that.
I'm offended. Jason and I are offended. No, I think that I go to a boxing gym every day. I'm just going to go on record as saying it ain't the Episcopal Church.
Yes.
And it has all kinds of people there with all kinds of stories and all kinds of lives lived. And I think the world is an offensive place for the sensibilities of Episcopalians. But the story of the incarnation is a God who chooses to come down, as Paul says, lower than the angels to live in that world. Not waiting for that world to get perfect, not waiting for them to get the right lane. That's the world. It's an offensive world. And so, I think we have to be willing to kind of wade into it and call it what it is, or be offended, and deal with the consequences of that, right? Or join in, or whatever. But it is a very incarnational, which is our stuff. But incarnation kind of gets wrapped up into some other things that I'm not sure is what Jesus imagined. And so, I think there's a piece of this, which is how do we take everything that we have and begin to mobilize it to get into that offensive world. and to call it what it is, or to name it whatever you want to name it, however you want it. But it's probably going to use learning a different language than the one that we go into it with. I have a sneaking suspicion that you are correct.
You two, what I know of you two is, and I think everybody would agree with me, is you both agitate the system very well. But it's clear that you love this church. Like you agitate, it seems to me, and what I know of you is you agitate because you love it. Will you tell us why you love this church, this tradition?
Okay. So my guess is that we all kind of make up stories about who people are. So I'll tell you that my family depended upon other people to give us housing for about 3 years of my high school kind of growing up time. And the gift for us was that we had family and friends who gave us a room in their home. But we didn't have a home. And there were reasons for that. But tied into this is that home very much became the place that offered shelter, life, hope, love, something bigger than myself, something bigger than what I was living in. And that was the Episcopal Church. And it was lay people and clergy who provided that. I think lots of churches do that. It's just that for me, the Episcopal Church became a very personal place of rescue at a time when I needed it, as well as it was a place of pain because of my own story as a priest kid, right? So it lives in both of those places for me. But for me personally, it is the rescuing part. It is the hope when you don't have hope part that makes me love it. When it's at its best, it saves people's lives. Yeah. And it saved mine.
It's beautiful. Yeah. You know, did you ever see Brokeback Mountain?
Yeah.
And he says, "I just can't quit you."
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. It's like, I can't quit you to the Episcopal Church. So I love it, and but I think I would be okay in another tradition, I think, but I just don't leave anything. I can't quit anything. There's nothing I have ever abandoned or quit. I think if you grew up with any kind of abandonment issues, you know that. It's like, that's never been it's like, I love it, but I love a lot of things. If I had been Methodist, I think I would have loved it, or Lutheran, or Buddhist. I think I could find my home. But I love it, and I can't quit it, and I love the idea that I've been in the same place for so long that I have eaten a whole loaf of bread a bite at a time. And that I've had gallons of wine a sip at a time, and that slowly but surely, it is forming me. I'm becoming part of the Eucharist, but it takes me forever. And that I love that I don't believe a lot of stuff anymore as much as I used to. Like, I think I believed more things about the church, and maybe I could read more of the creed without mumbling when I was a younger priest. But what I know that I'm left believing, I would lay down my life for in a second. I believe it so deeply. And I can live that way in this tradition. I can live as a priest saying that some things are very hard for me to believe, and that some things are very deep for me to believe. And y'all can understand that and accept that. And that's not true hardly anywhere else. And so I'm grateful for that.
I grew up in the evangelical tradition, and I still remember the day I was sitting on the back steps of our house in the city of San Diego, and I knew I couldn't believe on my own anymore. And I had grown up in this environment. It's like, hey, it's all on you. Like, faith is on you. Like, if you don't have it, you're out, right? And I remember crying, like, I need something to believe for me when I can't. And that's part of how I found my way to the Episcopal Church, so that when I can't believe, there's a community that will believe for me, that will have faith for me. So we have a group of people here that they came here, they got on planes, they paid their registration fees, they came to this event because they are into this idea of being on mission with God. With this captive audience, are there any last words, anything that you would want to make sure you leave them with before we end our time today?
I'm going first because yours is going to be so awesome. I want them to hear you last.
You're so nice to me. I don't understand, but you are so nice to me. That's not my experience of some bishops. That is true. That is true.
You don't have to comment on that.
I just want to, all those bishops out there watching this, I just want to say, I win. I will tell you, go back to Jason's question. Heresy trial begins tomorrow. I have a lot more questions about everything today than I did. I become less sure on many things as I become more dependent upon Jesus. And what I would say to you is courageously follow the invitation, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And probably the more uncomfortable it makes you in stepping out, the more likely it is that that's exactly the direction you're supposed to head. And so just to say to you, you're not the only ones making the journey. There are others with you, not just in this room, and not just to allow us to hold you up in faith when you don't have the faith, but maybe allow us to hold you up in courage when you don't have the courage.
That's beautiful. I just am so grateful to get to be here, and that we get to be with a bunch of folks who are doing a bunch of great work. And I hope that, in addition to feeling you got some good ideas and you took some notes, that you cried a little bit. It's so hard. If you're, beyond the, with the courage or whatever, it's just like day in and day out, it just, to me, sometimes feels heartbreaking. And I think that is the point. And that is what the worship is for me. So I love that in that place, it's where justice becomes our worship. When we allow it to be heartbreaking, when we don't get numb, which is so easy to do, or we've heard all the stories, or we've done all that. It's the very next person that we talk to that we allow them to break our heart. That is incarnation to me. And so I hope at some point, the blessing as we leave is for tears for you. You know, and that is powerful because once you're heartbroken, who cares? You know what I mean? As far as like nothing bad's going to happen. You know, it's over. You're free. And, you know, it makes you free enough to dream again. It makes you free enough to go back out. It makes you free enough to love your kids in a different way, to serve at the altar in a different way and celebrate how a candle's dancing different than it did before, because you're wide open and all that stuff feels so holy and beautiful. So in a crazy way, the blessing is to be heartbroken and teary. And I hope that for you in spades, just tons of it. And that's where I am. I mean, you don't leave the refugee camp where you have barbed wire fences, you know, at an abandoned military base that's surrounded by a vineyard. And I kept thinking of all those passages about the kingdom and how in the middle of it, literally in the middle of this vineyard kingdom, all these people are just, you know, it broke my heart again, and it hadn't happened in a long time. And I thought, wow, that's really a blessing. This is a blessing to be here and to be fired up and to do this again. So I hope that for you.
Thank you to both of you.
We should end on a joke.
We need a joke. Any jokes? You got a joke?
No, I'm saying there's something positive. That was positive, but it wasn't.
No, I told you, it was exactly what we need to. I think that's it. I mean, there's nothing pretty about this. There isn't anything pretty about what we're attempting to do. And you will be rejected by everybody for trying to do it. It's like the deal. It is the deal. And if you are fortunate enough to find yourself in a camp, in a refugee camp, a concentration camp, or those we don't like or are scared of or fearful of, and you find yourself in the midst of that, then God's blessing upon you, because that's where you're supposed to be. Because you're going to find Jesus there, wherever that is. And it can be in somebody's heart, in somebody's house, it can be in a neighbor, it's going to be there. So yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Truth.
Love.
Yeah, I feel like the Verizon guy or whatever need to like do that thing.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. Give you a mic. You could drop it.
All right.
Thanks to both of you.
Yeah,
Really.
thank you. Thank you all.